Hey everyone, I'm Brian Easterday and welcome back to Eye of the Storm Astrology. So in today's video, I'm going to be starting a very exciting series that I've been wanting to do for a while that I'm calling the Astrology of Psychopathy. So one of the interests that I have with astrology is, studying different charts, doing different types of case studies, whether that be like a historic case study or, whatever it may be. And one area that I find really fascinating is looking at the chart of serial killers, trying to understand why the mind would actually work that way and why a human being would actually do such depraved things to another human being. I think trying to understand that is something many different people have wanted to seek to try to accomplish. So that's what I'm going to be doing in today's video. And I'm going to be breaking down, the first one I'll be doing here, I'll be breaking down the chart of Richard Kuklinski, or, his nickname being the Iceman. And I'll get into exactly why that was. But before I get into that, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because I don't want you to be missing out on any other videos that can be helping you turn your challenges into strengths. So to get into Richard's chart, I'll go ahead and pull this up. So what I want to do here is I'm trying to keep this video shorter. This is not going to be a extremely in-depth thing. So even these positions that I'm talking on, I'm not going to be looking at every single detail that goes along with them. For example, like all their aspects, there's lots of different things to look at in a chart. You could spend a lot of time breaking it down. I'm just trying to make this a very quick video looking at the top 10 reasons why, through my perspective, he committed the types of crimes he did and why he did those. And I'm looking at, I tried to pick 5 of those from the birth chart and 5 of those from the Navamsha. Now keep in mind, and I'm going to put this disclaimer out here now, that, let me go ahead and minimize this here real quick. Go ahead and put this disclaimer out here now, that when you're looking at a chart, you have to look at it holistically. So if I'm talking about a single placement, for example, in his chart, he has Venus in Kritika. That does not mean that every person that you see with Venus in Kritika is then going to go be a serial killer. That's an extremely ridiculous, silly assumption. And if that's how you're practicing astrology, stop, because you have to learn to understand the essence of things and then learn how those things synthesize together and combine in order to be able to draw a conclusion. So you can't just take one indicator and then, extrapolate that onto the rest of the chart. You have to look at all these different things. And when you see repeated patterns, then those type of behaviors are more likely to manifest because you've seen that repeated pattern. So keep that in mind. Don't judge anyone else's chart or any other of these nakshatras or these signs, or look at them as if they're evil, or if a person has these, they're evil. That's not at all the purpose of this video series. The purpose of this is to bring understanding into looking at those people and the energies that they were working with, the karmas they were working with in their life, so we can try to bring a deeper understanding into like why those events occurred. So that's the disclaimer there. I'll also say here, another disclaimer too, is I'm not a certified psychologist or anything like that. I am definitely a person that has been through self-study, but I've spent my whole adult life seeking to understand the human mind through going through like my own struggles and having to resolve those, like do that work by myself, and then spending years and years delving into the occult, into sciences like Vedic astrology and things like that. So when I'm looking at this, I am looking at this and analyzing it through an esoteric or an occult perspective. This is not an official, any type of, like I said, I'm not like a certified psychologist or anything like that, to where I've went to the state to ask for permission to understand things. I'm definitely gained this knowledge and awareness through my own experience and practice and working with clients and those different types of things. So that's there as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. So the first 5 reasons that I want to get into, looking at his birth chart here. Now, the biggest reason here that I see that just immediately stands out to me is what is going on in his Lagna or his ascendant and his 7th house. So we see here, and for those of you who aren't familiar with how to read, and this is a North Indian style Vedic astrological birth chart. If you're not familiar with how to read those, I've done a video on how to read a North and South Indian style chart. So go back and check that video out, and then come back and finish this one. So this top middle box is always going to be the first house, and then you count counterclockwise. So this where Saturn and Aquarius is the second, Mercury and Sun and Pisces in the third, Aries in the fourth, so on and so forth. So when we have, I counted this as 1 point because it's Rahu and Ketu, and you can't ever look at one of those without looking at the other. And these, for those of you who aren't familiar with, these are the north and south node of the moon. And the way Rahu and Ketu work is always very interesting to see in a chart, but especially when it comes into like the Lagna and the seventh house, because the seventh house is our relationships, it has a profound effect on a person. And kind of that theme will really almost take over their life. So we see the Lagna being in Shravana Nakshatra, and then Rahu being in Uttara Ashara. So this is the one I really find interesting here is Rahu. Because Rahu is the trickster, the shapeshifter, it's our desires, it's things that are outside the norm of society. And then Uttara Ashara is a nakshatra that is all about like having a final victory. It's not like the previous nakshatra, Purva Ashara, that's all about moving towards the victory. Uttara Ashara is where you have the victory. So when he has Rahu, which is a planet that it really just not only takes on whatever qualities of the sign and house and nakshatra that it's in, but it amplifies those. It really blows those up. So when this comes into the first house, the sense of self, and you get Rahu and Capricorn, it's going to be a person who's very drawn towards wanting to have control and be able to make their desires manifest, come into reality, because Capricorn's an earth sign. So they want to bring all those desires in to actually make those happen. And with Uttara Ashara, what's going to happen is whenever Richard had a goal or something he was wanting to achieve, he was going to be absolutely just, he would accomplish that. And that was the thing too, is, for those of you who don't know, I guess to give a little background on Richard Kuklinski, he was a hitman for the mob in the early 80s and things like that, although he had criminal history going back before then, but most of his murders were done in the early 80s. He has claimed to killed anywhere between 100 and 200 men, although he wasn't convicted for that many crimes. So that's kind of his MO, is that he was a serial killer, but in the sense that not like a typical serial killer, that he wasn't doing it for like a specific purpose of pleasure or sexual gratification or anything like that. It was just business to him. This is that Rahu and Capricorn, and especially coming into the first house like that. And keep in mind, just because you see this placement someone else, it doesn't matter. There's lots of different variables that go into this here, and we'll keep getting into those. But when you bring Rahu into the ascendant like that, like I said, it's really going to amplify and change the personality that we see here, and make it to where those desires become very strong for the person, to where they're always going to be drawn towards doing like what they really want to do. Now, because Rahu and Ketu are always interacting together, we need to look at Ketu as well. And this is where it gets really, really interesting here. So we see Ketu in the sign of Cancer here in the Pushya Nakshatra, as well as Moon in the sign of Cancer in Pushya Nakshatra. Now, typically, this would be an excellent place for the Moon because it's in its own sign. It's in a Nakshatra that it rules, that it's very... that energy is very familiar to the Moon. That's really what it represents. So it's at home here. But when you bring Ketu here and you make it conjunct, what happens is, how Rahu and Ketu work is they're the points in which the solar ecliptic and the lunar ecliptic intersect. So this is why whenever we get eclipses, it's like in the Vedic mythology, it's saying that Rahu and Ketu are swallowing the moon or the sun. So when K2 comes conjunct with the moon, it's like K2 swallowing the moon, swallowing the mind. And the moon in Vedic astrology is our mind, our emotions, things like that. Now, Cancer is a sign that is all about the maternal energy, about nurturing, about caring, about wanting to take care of others. And the Pushya Nakshatra, very much that same theme, but just even more intensely. Like they really, Pushya Nakshatra really is like the Cancer of the Cancer people. So when we see K2 comes here, well, K2 in the mythology is this headless body. K2 separates us from things. K2 can make us kind of cold, can make us to where we just don't care about those things. So when we see, the moon come conjunct here in Cancer, in the Pushya Nakshatra, and in the 7th house of relationships, what it does is it makes him very emotionally distant and cold towards other human beings. And what that's going to do is Rahu and Ketu are going to be exchanging aspects here, as well as Moon's going to be bringing its aspect into the 1st house. And for those of you who aren't familiar, imagine for what an aspect is. Imagine yourself standing with like a flashlight, and then you're shining that light into a certain area, and it's lighting that up. The planets do the same thing. It's known as, in the Vedic tradition, we call it drishti, which means to glance or to look. So where the planet's drishti, where its aspect is, it's kind of looking towards that area of the chart. So it's going to be bringing its influence into that area of that person's life. So when we see this kind of coldness, this lack of wanting to nurture and take care of others, just feeling disconnected from that, coming into that 1st house, it means, like I said, as a sense of when it comes to relationships, he's not really going to care about others. It's going to be about himself. Now, he did, if there was one thing that he, in his life, that he did kind of care about or was very drawn towards it, he did want to take care of his family, like his wife and his kids. He preferred to be at home. They would say that if he didn't have to leave, he would have never left. If he didn't have to go work or do things, which meant go kill people, he would have never left the home. That being said, though, he also was very abusive in the home. And, like I said, I'm trying to keep this short without getting too much into it, but you can't understand someone that has such complex behavior in a simple, short thing. So I'll try to keep it short, but also do it justice as well without just glancing over things. But if we look into the family history, his father was an alcoholic and extremely abusive. Even his little brother, which you could see this through his 3rd house because that's younger siblings, his little brother was actually convicted for sexually assaulting and murdering a little girl and her dog, and he had like thrown them off a building. So definitely like some family issues and traumas and things that have come in to where probably as like part of a psychological defense, this being disconnected, being cold emotionally was part of the way that he actually probably had to like survive his childhood and things like that. But that obviously came into play later on in his life. So, and then obviously the Rahu and Capricorn is going to be bringing its aspect into the 7th house. So when it came to what he wanted, which was to make money, to do things, those Rahu and Capricorn things, he did that by taking advantage of other people, not being nourishing to other people, doing the exact opposite of that, which is what we can see with that like K2 moon in Cancer there. So, and again, I'm just trying to explain these in a very basic way. I'll do more in-depth breakdowns later on. If you guys do like this, let me know in the comments, because then if this is something you guys want to hear more of, I'll know I can do longer, more in-depth videos and case studies. I'm just trying to keep this to some basic points that if you guys want to go research this on your own, this will give you a great jumping off point and some places to look at in the chart. The next thing that I really see here, one more thing too. K2, so Rahu and K2 will always aspect 5, 7, and 9 places from themselves. So what I think is interesting here is that K2 is also, like we talked about, it aspecting into the 1st house. It's also aspecting into this 3rd house and into this 11th house of gains. So we can see that was part of the way that he was bringing in and earning his money, is that K2 and Cancer being like emotionally distant, everything like that, coming into a social network circle that was like a Scorpio type of social network circle. So people who could have been criminal, obviously he was working for the mob. You know, if they deal with life, death, sudden changes, hidden things, all that different type of stuff. So K2 definitely would have been bringing that influence and affecting the way he was making his money. And that's definitely something you can see. Even in the way that he got his nickname, the Iceman, the main reason is that one of his things he would do, and this wasn't with all his victims, but with some of them, is that he actually froze the bodies after he would kill them for like a period of time for a couple of years. And then he would go dump them later. And that's how he actually ended up getting caught. And they nicknamed him the Iceman. But as well as like, if you go back and watch his interviews, he's just a very cold individual. Like if they asked him how he felt about killing those people, he'd be like, I didn't feel anything. There's just like nothing there. That's that K2 moon conjunction that we see. The next really interesting point is looking at his sun and his Mercury, because in Vedic astrology, the sun represents like our ego, our soul. Mercury represents our intellect, our communication, those type of things. Now, these are falling into the sign of Pisces. The sun falling into the nakshatra of Revati, which is very, very interesting, because Revati, one of the things it's known as is being the shepherd of souls. Now, typically this is expressed in a very healthy way. These people tend to have a lot of spiritual wisdom, want to guide others, want to teach, you know, those type of things. In fact, I happen to be a Revati Lagna myself. But when it's a shepherd of souls, you can see that like his son being here, one of the things he did is that, yeah, he was a shepherd of souls. Like in other words, like he escorted people to the afterlife. He killed them. That's definitely something that you could see with a placement like that. And then Mercury here being in a nakshatra known as Uttara Bhadrapada. And this is a nakshatra that can be a very intense nakshatra. In fact, I see it show up in quite a lot of serial killers' charts. But at the same time, this is also a nakshatra that shows up in people who are great healers and spiritual people who have a lot of wisdom. It is a nakshatra that has a lot of duality. It can deal with the darkness, with the light, with the masculine, with the feminine, water, fire. It has a polarity to it. So it really has this quality of being able to go either way. So then when you put that, something like that with a sun in Revati Nakshatra, you know, you can see that the side of Uttara Bhadrapada that came out was the darker side. And it ended up having him escort people to the afterlife. In other words, he was killing them. The third house is also our willpower, our strength of will, you know, those type of things, our determination. So we can see here that he definitely was a person that like could have two sides. You know, he could be saying and thinking one thing, but on the other, there's always this hidden side type of thing, because Mercury falling in Uttara Bhadrapada will really do that, especially because Mercury is a very neutral planet. So it will take on the qualities of whatever sign and house and things that it's in. Now, this is also exchanging aspects with the next point that I'm going to be looking at, which is Mars, which is retrograde in the sign of Virgo in his 9th house. Now, this influence of Revati and of Uttara Bhadrapada that's coming in with the Sun and Mercury here, those qualities are going to be coming in and aspecting this Mars in Virgo, which is retrograde. Now, Mars in Virgo can become very... It could be a person that can definitely have some like irritation, especially when it's retrograde like this. That's where it's slowing down or really feeling the influence of Mars here. So when it came to things being the way he wanted, because that's kind of a Virgo quality, is really wanting things the way you want. When Mars comes there, and especially retrograde, it can really make a person like want things the way they want to take action on that and be aggressive towards doing that. Now, keep in mind, again, the disclaimer, that doesn't mean everyone that has Mars in Virgo it's being expressed that way. This is just one of the ways it can be expressed. And keep in mind that I'm reading this chart in the context of this chart. We know who this person is, when they lived, when they died, what their crimes were, those type of things. So I have that information to be able to factor into. So I'm kind of hitting on just the points that are relevant. But there's also a lot of other things that you could see in this chart besides that. But I'm trying to keep it short and relevant here too. So that Mars in Virgo is going to be getting that influence of that duality that comes from that Mercury and that Uttara Bhadrapada nakshatra and that Sun in Revati, to where like if he got very irritated with people or they made him mad, then yeah, he would just end them. He would just end their life. And if, like I said, if you watch his interviews, he'll go back and say that. Like sometimes, he would kill people just because, it was a hit and it was just about the money. But there was definitely some times where he would either like assault somebody or kill them just because they angered him or they annoyed him or something like that. So you could definitely see that. And like I said, Mars, Sun, and Mercury are all exchanging their influence back and forth. So there's a lot of that exchange of energy going between those things. Mars is also aspecting Mars is also aspecting the fourth, the third, and the fourth, the third house, and the 12th house. So we can see that, especially that Mars in the 12th, you could really see that because the 12th house can represent hidden places, loss of energy, but it can also represent things like prisons. So what was it? His anger, his temper, his actions, the harm he caused towards others, actually what landed him in prison. That you could see that with that Mars aspecting the 12th house. So that's a very interesting thing to note as well. Then the fourth thing that I think is really interesting is this Venus in Taurus. Now, it's in the Kritika nakshatra, which is a nakshatra that bridges from the end of Aries into the beginning of Taurus. And this is in the very first pada. So Venus has just entered Taurus. So Venus is the planet that rules Taurus. So normally this would be a very, very strong placement. But what we can see here is that because it's just beginning to enter Taurus, so it's just beginning to enter that favorable position where before it was sitting in Aries, where it's not really as happy there. And Kritika nakshatra is a sign that's all about like cutting things. It's symbolized by the knife. It can be very like our word critical comes from Kritika, so that it can be very logical, very straightforward, very calculating. And like I said, it can actually deal with cutting things, with stabbing people, those type of things. And that's actually some, so he would kill in a variety of ways. He was very, very tactical about the way he would go do that. But sometimes he would stab them and those type of things, or just cut up and dismember the bodies, those type of things, and then he would saran wrap them and then freeze them, that. So that could definitely be seen with that. And Venus is also ruling that 10th house where Jupiter's sitting here, which is like what we're known for in the world. And the nakshatra that Jupiter's sitting in, Vishaka nakshatra, is a nakshatra that bridges from Libra into Scorpio. So you could really see that he had a lot of where his morals could, go to maybe the darker side of things. Like when you see a Jupiter, like, because it's on that edge of, it's almost in Scorpio. It's right on the cusp of his 10th and his 11th house. So you definitely can see the morals had an influence, or the lack of morals there were something that affected his career. And it was something, or, not affected his career, obviously, like, his career in the context of, being a hitman. And because it is in that Vishaka nakshatra, which is all about it's symbolized by the victory arch. So it's about accomplishing things, having a victory, having a goal, being very strong-willed, being very driven. But it's about bridging things too. And especially with it being like, is Jupiter actually falling like right on the cusp of Libra and Scorpio, that bridging quality in this third pada of Vishaka really comes out. And what did he do is, well, he was kind of like the bridge between life and death for people. That's one way you could observe that based off the position of Jupiter there. So, that Venus definitely has that Venus in Kritika definitely has a very strong influence over the way what he was known for, came out. He was known for, doing things that were, he was obviously murdering people. Now, the fifth thing on the birth chart that I see here is that Saturn in Aquarius, because Saturn is the ruler of this whole chart because it rules the sign of Capricorn, which is the Lagna. And it's in the second house of values and morals here, in the sign of Aquarius, in the nakshatra of Shatabishak. So Saturn in Aquarius, you can really see that this person can be very Normally, this is a great position for Saturn. But in the context of this chart, what it did is it really made it to where he was kind of cold and distant, like Saturnian, in not only his values and his morals, but in regards to like his social network circle, the way he saw the world. He was just, because Saturn is a planet, it's very far away from us, so it's cold and it's distant in the way that it expresses itself. And Aquarius is a sign of like social network circles. The second house deals with our values, our morals, the things that we're taking in. Well, Saturn here can make it to where, you know, like I said, the values, the morals are very cold, very distant, doesn't really care about people that much. But it would make a person very interested towards working hard in regards to getting gains. And this was something, again, he was very money motivated. We can see that with that Rahu in the ascendant. And Saturn here would make it, how does he go about getting money? He's actually being cold towards people. He's killing people. Saturn also represents the ending of things, the death of things, those type of things. So we can see that he earned his wealth and his income, and the money he was able to like put back and save to support himself, that came from being that Saturnian type of figure. Now, Saturn also aspects the 4th house here, the 8th house, and the 11th house. Because Saturn will aspect 3 houses from itself. And keep in mind, we do inclusive counting in Vedic astrology, which means you start counting from the house that it's in. So it aspects 3 houses, you know, into Aries, into his 4th house. It aspects into the 8th house of Leo, which is very interesting. And that's the big one I want to point out here too, is Saturn bringing its influence into that 8th house. The 8th house deals with life and death and hidden things, traumatic things, secret things, you know, all of those different type of activities. And he has Leo here because he's a Capricorn ascendant. So it's what and Leo represents, like, it's like our sense of self. It's like who we are, our ego. That's one part of the chart where we can see that, something like that for ourselves. So what was he? He was a person that he was very like hidden. He was very behind the scenes. He didn't want people to know who he was or what he was doing. His kingdom that he built for himself was built off of death, you know, sudden changes, hidden type of criminal activities, those type of things, you know. And like I said, Saturn brings that influence. So it made him a very controlling person. And where would you see that control come out? You would see it come out in a hidden place behind the scenes because it's in that 8th house. So that's something that you could see there. And then Saturn bringing its influence into the 11th house of gains. Very much we can see Saturn was a huge influence in the way that he made his money, because it's in the 2nd house of stored wealth. And then it's also aspecting the 11th house of gains, which is like wealth that we have coming in. The 2nd house is wealth that we have set aside. So what happens here is when it aspects into Scorpio, well, he brought that control. And what did he do? He used it to, again, that theme of life and death, ending things, transformation, doing things that are hidden. That's all can be seen there with the aspect. So Saturn being the planet that it rules the 1st house and the 2nd house, but it's also aspecting all these other really important houses, had a huge effect as to why he became such a cold and distant person in the way of what he was doing for career. So that's looking at the birth chart. So the next 5 things I want to get into are looking at his D9 chart, or what's known as the Navamsha chart in Vedic astrology. Now, this is a very important chart that we put a lot of emphasis on in the Vedic system. And the reason is, as the Navamsha, many people will call it the marriage chart and those type of things. It's not really completely accurate. It can represent things like that, but what the Navamsha chart represents, it's known as the fruit of the tree. So these are the qualities that the planets actually, they really develop into. So what something looks like in the birth chart may not be how the way it actually ends up developing as that planet matures, as you go through your life. The Navamsha also deals with our dharma. So and if you're not familiar with what dharma is, I've done a video on that. Go back and watch it if you haven't. But dharma is the essence of things. So the reason why I want to look at this chart is because it'll really show us the essence of a lot of the planets in Richard's chart here. So the dharma, the qualities of what he was really like as a person. So first off, we see the Lagna, the ascendant, in the Nikshatra. It's in Cancer, and it's in the Nikshatra of Aslesha. Now, Aslesha is a very interesting Nikshatra in the sense that it can be they're the more kind of harsh or sharp type of Cancer people, because it's symbolized by the serpent, like the deities that rule Leash are the Nagas. It can deal with poisons and things like that. And the reason why I thought this was really interesting is because one of the Richard's favorite ways to do a hit was to use cyanide. It's a poison. So he would put it in like a liquid, spray, or, and he could like bump into someone at a club and spray it in their face, and or spill it on their shirt from a drink, and it would soak in through their pores of their clothes. And that was the way he actually got caught, is that he was trying to purchase cyanide from an undercover detective, and they set him up for that. So I thought that was very, very interesting that his Leash Nakshatra is the Lagna Nakshatra in the Navamsha chart. So like the essence of what he really was is he's a person that could be very cold, very calculating. And like I said, that use of poisons I thought was something very interesting. And again, I could talk about this nakshatra a lot more. And keep in mind, Aslesha is also a nakshatra that can be extremely spiritual. There's a lot of healers with Aslesha placements, those type of things. But the quality of how we could see how it really affected him was, that use of poisons as the way of actually harming his victims, or like I said, it was his favorite method of killing because it was quick and quiet and very hard to detect. Then we also have Mars, again retrograde, sitting in the Pushya Nakshatra. So this is like where Mars is actually at its place of like lowest debilitation. It doesn't do very well here, so we can see that, like, especially with Mars being retrograde, his temper, the way he dealt with his emotions, really some of the only emotions he could really feel was anger. So he wasn't a very nurturing person. The way what he gave to people was violence. You can see that with like that type of thing. Then the second point, of the D9 chart that I find very interesting is Venus here. Now, Venus comes into the sign of Capricorn, into the nakshatra of Uttara Ashada, which we spoke about that's where Rahu is in his birth chart, in his Lagna. So Venus coming into Uttara Ashada, what it means, like when it came to relationships, he was an extremely like controlling person. A relationship was it was like a fight, right? It was literally like going to war. So that's what, as a hitman, what he was doing, he was literally like going out and controlling people and putting it into their life. And he was a very effective hitman. That's why he had the reputation that he did. And so whenever he was coming out after you, you were pretty much done for, type of thing. He would say that in his interviews of like, no, if I wanted to get somebody, like I would get them. That's that Venus in Uttara Ashada. Like, it's that victory that you don't have to move towards, you have it, like, because it's just such a strong, individualistic, intense nakshatra that those people, they may have to try over and over again. They may suffer some defeats, but like ultimately, like in the end, they are going to be victorious in whatever their goal is. So you can really see that there. Now, the third really interesting thing that we see here are this Rahu and Saturn conjunction in the 8th house in the sign of Aquarius, and then Ketu and Moon conjunction in the sign of Leo in the 2nd house. A lot to look at here. This is a super interesting one here. So first off, Saturn and Rahu are in the nakshatra of Dhanishta, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Dhanishta. So Dhanishta is a nakshatra that's known as like the star of wealth. It's a very driven nakshatra, but very much where these people that can really want to have gains and things like that. Now, for him, we have Rahu here coming into Dhanishta. So you get Rahu and Dhanishta, it can become a person who they really have a lot of focus on gains, on acquiring things. And keep in mind, gains isn't just money. It could be gains of property, gains of like a social network circle. It could be gains of knowledge, of wisdom, those different types of things. In his context, it's definitely going to be more towards the side of wealth, especially with Rahu being there. Then Saturn being here as well, we bring that planet that deals with ending things, with cutting off the life force, those type of things. And it's in the 8th house, again, of like death, hidden things that are kind of taboo towards society, not normal things. So we can see here, what did he do? Like, his desires caused him to have control of people, to the point of the way he went about gaining his wealth was through the ending lives of others. So we have that influence. Now we have Ketu and Moon conjunct here again, and they're in Leo in the 2nd house, and they're in a nakshatra known as the Magha nakshatra. Excuse me. So Magha nakshatra, one that is interesting because it's symbolized by the royal throne room. These people can very much have a sense of like, I'm in charge of things. They really will want to have their own kind of kingdom type of attitude. So for him, his kingdom of what he was wanting to build was like his wealth, the money he could set back, stuff like that. And the way he went about doing that was just being a very cold person. Magha nakshatra, the deities that rule it are known as the Pitaris. Now, the Pitaris in the Vedic system are the deities that help Lord Yama, who's like the judge. And whenever like a human soul dies, the Pitaris are the one that come and they escort you. They have an association with the ancestors and things like that. So when we can see someone with like Ketu in that, and Ketu rules Magha nakshatra, and then Moon coming here, we can see a person that they definitely had a mind towards it. They were very cold, and that what did he do to gain his wealth? Well, he escorted people to the afterlife, much like the Pitaris do. So we see that influence coming in, and it's aspecting into his 8th house. And then Saturn and Rahu, which we talked about, which has a very similar energy as that, is aspecting in the 2nd. So kind of a repeated theme of energy here, just coming through very, very strong with this Rahu and Ketu conjunction going on between the 2nd and the 8th house here in his Navamsha chart. And again, I could get into that a whole lot more, but I'm trying to keep this short and to the point. And again, if you are enjoying this and you do want one that's like much more in depth, let me know in the comments below. Let me know how you guys are enjoying this. The 4th thing that I see, that is interesting about this D9 chart is that Jupiter is in the 12th house in the Ardra nakshatra. So Jupiter and Ardra nakshatra can become a place where a person can become a very stormy person, because Ardra nakshatra is symbolized by the storm, and it's like a storm of destruction. It's actually Lord Shiva's nakshatra. So it can be a very hard one to work with. In fact, my Jupiter also happens to be in Ardra nakshatra. It just falls into my 4th house because I'm a Pisces ascendant. So it can be a nakshatra that brings a lot of spirituality and wisdom and wealth, but only after you've learned how to deal with your anger, how you've learned how to master that destructive force. And it's not easy to do. Now for Richard here, it came into his 12th house. So that's known as like the house of losses. But you could also see here is like, one of the things is Jupiter is our morality. And then you bring it into like that 12th house is that, in a nakshatra like Ardra that's very destructive. You can see that like his morals, whereas like what he cared about was being willing to destroy people. And where did it land him? It landed him in prison, which is the 12th house. Or it was also his losses. In other words, like he was spending and putting a lot of energy into those things, and it ended up making him lose all sorts of things. Like he lost his family, he lost his children. Like one of his daughters does not have very, I've listened to interviews with her. She does not have very good memories at all of him. She doesn't talk to him. She's disowned him. So he lost his family. He lost his morals, any spiritual wisdom he could have been gaining. He pissed away. those different types of things. You can really see that happening here. So I thought that was a very interesting one to see, that, you know, in regards to what he was valuing and things like that, it was definitely things that were not normal. Because Ardra is a nakshatra that it symbolizes it represents people who are like outcast, people who are like not normal people. They're very unique. It's actually the Yogatara for the star that makes up the nakshatra of Ardra is Betelgeuse. So for those of you who are familiar with that star, that will also give you some qualities of Ardra nakshatra that you can look at there. But, you know, not to spend too much time on that. So the 10th and final reason that I want to get into here is his sun being in Pisces in Uttara Bhadrapada. So this is a very interesting placement. One, the sun is what is known as Virgotama here. So Virgotama in Vedic astrology is whenever a planet is in the same sign in the birth chart and in any of the Varga charts. So that could be the Navamsha, the D10, you know, any of the other divisional charts. The more charts you see that repeated in, the stronger those qualities are. So here we see it in his Navamsha chart, and it's in the nakshatra of Uttara Bhadrapada. So this becomes very important, not only is because it's Virgotama, but it's the sun. So it's his soul, it's ego. So if we're wanting to look at the overall essence, the overall dharma of what he was as a person, this is the position we want to look at. One of them, but definitely a big one. So it's going to make it to where he was a person that had two sides to him, like a Jekyll and Hyde type of nature, because this is what Uttara Bhadrapada can do. And they're always going to have some type of duality to them. That will always be there. But here it very much made him, like I said, a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing, to where he really was a person that may have had one face on here, but behind him there was a lot of rage that was hidden. And the reason why I say that is, if we look at the dispositor or the ruler of Pisces here, it's Jupiter. And Jupiter, again, like we talked about previously, is in that Ardra nakshatra in the 12th house of losses. So we can see that he spent a lot of time putting a lot of focus, a lot of his energy and efforts into that type of destructive anger and destructive rage. And that had a big influence on his personality, of the type of person he was, that, like, much like in the mythology, like when Shiva gets angry, like you don't want to piss off Shiva, because then he becomes Rudra and he will destroy everything in his path. The Iceman was much the same way. If people knew that, like, this was not the type of guy that you would piss off, because he would end you. He would literally end your life. Yeah, so he's a very dangerous person. So you can see that those qualities were things that really had a huge influence on his personality and what he was known as. Like when people think of Richard Kuklinski, what do they think of? Well, they think of a serial killer. They think of a hitman. So you see that really had a big influence on the way through which he was viewed in the world. So, you know, that's the last little final thing. And again, I could spend hours diving into these. And in fact, at some point, I'll probably be like writing some books, just doing individual case studies where I really get in depth on things. But I wanted to keep this one as short as possible, you know, although I know it's probably about an hour long or something like that already. But there's really not a way to do an astrological breakdown of something like this in a very quick type of thing, because astrology is not a simple science. It's a very complex science, and you can't just go make simple assumptions and judgments on a subject that is this serious of a subject. You need to look at it from a very holistic perspective and look at it correctly and respectfully and that type of thing. So I hope you guys found this interesting. If you did, be sure to like, comment, you know, hit that subscribe and hit that notification bell as well, because I don't want you to miss out on any future videos that could be helping you turn your challenges into strengths. If you guys need to get a hold of me for consultations, courses, to contact me to ask questions for whatever reason, you can click the link in the description below. That goes to my link tree, and that is a one-stop shop for my social media, website, all my different services that I have. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this. I appreciate your time. And until next time, guys, remember, by creating more awareness, we create more opportunity to be the best versions of ourselves. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.